All right, hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me this evening. I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about a research study that I've been doing over this semester in a class called called Action Research. This research project is all about promoting students' literacy skills through differentiated instruction. So who will benefit from this? This presentation is designed for other educators, especially in kindergarten, and that's who I have with me today is my grade level colleagues, and I hope that they find this information beneficial to them and learn a few strategies about differentiated instruction. So to start off, I wanted to share about my problem statement. My problem statement was basically, in reading instruction, I always struggled with the organization of these tasks and making sure that it was high quality instruction that not only met the needs of the students but also the needs of the state requirements and the standards. And so this was my problem. I wanted to find strategies that are effective and activities that are effective and find a more organized way in a certain amount of time what the developmentally appropriate amount of time to spend in each tier of instruction was. So for this reason, I conducted a study that aimed to promote students' literacy skills through differentiated instruction. Some research questions that guided this study was how much time is developmentally appropriate for each tier of instruction? What are some meaningful activities for students during instruction? And how can educators promote students' literacy skills through differentiated instruction? So in the last semester, I conducted a literature review to see what research was already out there, and I found several findings that support the need of differentiated instruction. One of the studies that I researched found that teachers must be intentional about how they choose to structure their reading block and their instructional time. They must find purposeful and research-based activities that meets the needs of all students that have different abilities and interests. So I knew that was important after reading that study. So one of the recommended ways to organize differentiated instruction is through assessment-based differentiated instruction. This requires the teacher to gather up data before, during, and after the instruction to identify the strengths and the needs of the student. So in one particular study, the results showed that the students who received an assessment-based instruction had higher scores at the end than the control group. So when teachers organize their differentiated instruction through assessments, it ensures that we make decisions that are based on data instead of just our own thoughts. Another thing that I found in the literature was the need to correlate all three tiers of instruction to maximize effectiveness. This study stated that it was not as effective when the tiers were not aligned with one another. So for example, if I taught my whole group on a particular, let's call it long vowel A. If I taught my whole group on long vowel A and then we would go to small group and focus on digraphs, that will not be as an effective instruction because it's not correlated. That was interesting to find in that study. So my research and study design, it was conducted over 6 weeks. The 13 students in my kindergarten class were selected as the focus and control group for the study. I used a quantitative approach to determine whether the literacy skills were promoted. So the 2 quantitative data pieces I used were MClass as well as weekly pre and post tests. So for data analysis, I started by reviewing the data simply. I started with MClass because that's what we use for our monthly progress monitoring. And after I reviewed the whole entire class's data and looked for patterns, strengths, and weaknesses, I dove into each individual student and what their strengths and weaknesses were. The results of this data can be viewed in the coming slides. And then after that, I looked at the weekly pretests. I looked at the whole class and for improvements for strengths and weaknesses, just like MClass. And I also wanted to see if there was improvement from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. And this data can also be found in coming slides. So this is the MClass data that we collected over the 6 weeks, and you can zoom in for more detailed numbers, but I will go over these findings in the next slide. But for MClass, there are 1-minute assessments that test different categories: letter naming fluency, phoneme segmentation, correct letter sounds, nonsense words, and high frequency words. Supposedly, these 5 test areas are supposed to give a very good predictor of their reading success in the future. So MClass, I found that each student has shown growth in 1 or more of the literacy skills that I assessed, and I was really happy for that. So that showed that the differentiated instruction I was doing was having a positive impact. An overall class-wide strength that I observed was letter naming fluency, because 70% of the class had reached the benchmark in this category. The category that they most improved in was phoneme segmentation. They started off the year not even being able to do this at all. Most of them had zeros, and they have shown so much growth in this category specifically. Now, the largest deficit that I noticed was nonsense word fluency, and this tests their ability to decode and blend sounds together and to make words. So that was a red flag for me and something that I'm going to aim to fix in the future. Now, looking at the weekly assessment findings, I laid it out on this side. You can see all the students, week 1 through 5, and then the blue is the pre-test and the green is the post-test. And that shows the scores of how each student did. Now, and this last category shows the weekly improvements. So, pretty good growth. Most students made improvements on the majority of the weeks. There were a couple that didn't make improvements, but for the most part, that's pretty good results. So the weekly tests, they consisted of 3 parts. They consisted of identification of the long vowel, blending of a long vowel word, and segmentation and spelling of a given word. And I found that students were able to identify the patterns, and they could also spell the words, most of them, which that correlates with the phoneme segmentation in MClass. But students struggled with this blending portion of the assessment, and that correlates to the data on the MClass that shows the weakness in the nonsense words. I found that very interesting. So, in conclusion, in order for students to reach their high expectations, we must ensure that we're having the highest quality instruction possible, and we can do that through differentiated instruction. So, through this study, I've learned activities and strategies that are effective for differentiated instruction, and I've learned the developmentally appropriateness of this for kindergarten. It was very interesting to see. I also learned that we must spend the appropriate amount of time in each tier of instruction, which I found kindergarten's sweet spot to be about 20 to 30 minutes of Tier 1 whole group instruction, and then 40 to 60 minutes of Tier 2 or Tier 1 small group instruction, and then Tier 2 instruction as I saw needed and as I saw necessary. So differentiated instruction allows us to excel in meeting the needs of unique learners, gain valuable knowledge of their skills during small group time, and to promote their literacy skills and set them on a path to success.